Today, we're going to look at a little bit of deepening into our understanding of what psychological boundary is. And I also want to help us bridge and really wrap our heads and hearts around why a peaceful inner core, even in a moment of discord, would come out of psychological boundary, and how psychological boundaries help us be more respectful and connected. So, a psychological boundary is really a gatekeeper. A psychological boundary is a gatekeeper of energy and information flow. And we let energy and information flow in when it's healthy, and we keep what's not healthy out. How do we decide what is and is not healthy? So I have information for my clients that sometimes they feel great relief for with this, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they feel a great disappointment about this one. The only person who can decide what's healthy for you is you. So I don't tell my clients what is healthy or not about the energy and information flow their psychological boundary lets in. I do help them explore how it lands for them, how different information and energy that may be coming in. I sometimes will need to help them with discernment. So let's listen inside to your gut brain and your heart brain. Let's listen inside to the sensations in your body and the feelings that you have about the situation or about this even one little teeny tiny piece of information. And through that, we may make discoveries about what's healthy and what's not so healthy for them. And then we're going to put it into this psychological boundary, which will eventually be born out of an image. And I'll tell you more about that in sessions to come. So when it comes to psychological boundary, there are two elements of it. One is knowing that the most benevolent and respectful thing I can do is allow another person to experience their emotional process. And two, discernment. Is this healthy? Is this about me? Is this true? And they'll often ask me, well, how do I know what's true, Jules? And I'll say, I don't know. Listen inside, turn inwards, and just say, really, is that true? Right? And if it's not true, we're going to keep it out. If it's not about me, I'm going to keep it out. Right? So if it didn't pass both of those tests, we'd go ahead and keep it out. What if it's an I don't know or a maybe? So if it's an I don't know or a maybe, that is a space for a pause. So let's say my husband's name is Adam. Let's say Adam says something and I'm not sure if it's true and I'm not sure if it's about me. I'm going to let that rest right at the edge of my psychological boundary so that I have a pause where I can really think about it. And maybe in that pause, I'll let it in and maybe not. Maybe that is going to go ahead and stay out. So when you're in a maybe, it's just a moment to turn in and be really clear with yourself about what's true and what's about me, right? What's about you. So I want to jump into a little bit of work around compassion and empathy, because I think one of the pushbacks I get from clients around the creation of a psychological boundary is, but won't a psychological boundary leave me cold? Won't a psychological boundary leave me to not care as much as I do, to not feel as connected to other people as I do? For a lot of people that I work with, I've noticed they imagine having acceptance of space between us equals disconnection. And I share with them this research, which is vast and comes from a lot of different spaces. If you're really interested in an in-depth neuroscience-heavy summary of it, I will turn you to Sapolsky's book. His name is Robert Sapolsky, and he wrote a book called Behave. And in that, he takes a deep dive into some of this. I'm going to sum it up for you here, though. So compassion versus empathy. So when we're empathetic with someone, we really feel with them. One of the things that happens when we feel with them and only feel with them, stop it right there and just stay in the feeling with them space, is that our limbic brain in the subcortical system starts to get a bit hotter. It starts to fire what's called excitatory neurochemicals, which is going to make that lower brain move a lot faster and with a more painful and larger sensation awareness, right? So when I'm in empathy with someone else, let's say I'm in empathy with somebody else, even if they're feeling joy, I'm going to start feeling joy in my body. And that expansion is going to be an excitatory neurochemical dump in my lower brain. That's great. And what the research says is actually when I'm in a ton of empathy with another person, particularly if they are in pain, the most likely response I have is actually to push them away. Because if I stay in empathy with them, then my limbic system riles with them. And now my fight flight might get triggered a little bit, or maybe even my social defense system, which is just a little bit less big than our fight flight. And I'm going to start pushing away because there is a wise recognition that staying in this deep, attuned, sharing feeling space, it's creating issues. It's creating discomfort in my system. And I know the source of the discomfort. It's the other guy. So if I stay in too much empathy for too long, and just empathy, I'm probably going to push back and maybe move into a space of judgment of them or nervousness about being around them. I might even anticipate being uncomfortable with them. And so I'm not going to want to share space with them anymore. And so when we stay in resonance with somebody and only resonance with somebody, what the research actually shows us is we actually don't hang very well. Now, I can't go too cold either though, right? Because if I don't let myself feel with them at all, what if I'm lacking empathy? If I don't let myself feel with them at all, then I have too rigid of a psychological boundary. I'm not taking in their energy and information flow, even the stuff that is true, even maybe the stuff that's about me. And then I'm going to also be distanced from them. What's the answer? Compassion. So our science is so new. Already we're disproving things. I'm just thinking a whole list of things that have been disproven just went through my mind right now. So I don't know what we're going to find in 20 years, in 30 years, in 5 years. What I do know is what I can tell you right now, and that's just where the science is. As far as we know, compassion is the thing that calms down the parts of our brain that process pain, process meaning of pain, and process fear. So if what we want is to help ourselves calm down the hurt and calm down the scared feelings, right? Compassion is key. So what we want, and when I think about compassion, I think about this larger process where the empathy does come first. I do feel with, and then, whoop, I'm going to jump into more of a compassionate space. And that compassionate space does have distance, where I can create a space between you and me, and I can see that pain is happening out here in you, and I can connect to different moments in me where I've also had pain. It's not about leaving people. It's actually about allowing ourselves to come back together. And what Sapolsky does really well in his book Behave is he does a good job of interweaving and synthesizing all of this vast research that leads us to this thinking. And the end point is that people who are compassionate and who follow that compassion with compassionate action, who back up their felt sense of being touched by someone else's pain with actually moving into doing something about someone else's pain. What they have is a psychological distance between themselves and the other person. So one of the things I think that is misunderstood maybe about psychological boundary is that if what I want is to act altruistically, having a psychological boundary is actually essential. It's what I call protected and connected. And I got that language from Terry Real. When he said that, it hit home with me. And I remember being in a training when he said that. He said, it's protected and connected. And all these different pieces of neuroscience research came into my brain, like at the same time. It was this moment of synthesis for my mind. I said, oh yeah, because that and that and that, which is part of why this course came into being. So let me put it into real time, because we can talk about the neuroscience, but I think bringing it into an embodied reality is really helpful. So here's an example from my life. I am notorious for keeping my phone off. I actually don't like ringing phones, and so my ringer's off all the time. Sometimes my phone is off, and that makes it really, really hard for my husband to reach me. And that drives him totally up the wall. And we've had a lot of discussions and have created a lot of agreements around this. One thing that doesn't feel good to me is I don't want to just have my ringer on all the time. That feels like it wouldn't be in my authenticity. And so we've made agreements such as soon as I'm done with work, I text him, I'm done with work, and I turn my ringer on. Do I do this every single day? Sorry, I don't. I try to. I do it more days than not, but no, I don't do it every day. So let's imagine that there's this day that I didn't do it. I didn't do the agreement, right? So I broke our agreement, and I'm home 20 minutes later than he expected me, right? And so he's actually a little worried and annoyed when I come in the door. And he expresses that, whatever, verbally, a little bit in his face. He's a gentle communicator, so, not bad or anything, but just like, hey, you didn't text. We needed oat milk, right? So here he is, he's coming at me, right? And let's say I don't have my psychological boundary operating right then. What's going to happen? Well, I could get defensive. I could say, what? It's only 20 minutes, not that big a deal. Oh, I know I said that, but I'll get it next time, right? So I could move into a little bit of pushing away this experience. Or I could move into maybe shame. You're right, I'm bad, I totally did this thing, right? And now he's worried about me and taking care of me instead of him getting the repair he needs in that moment. Now let's practice it with a psychological boundary. So let's imagine I have my psychological boundary up. It knows two things. It is benevolent and respectful for Adam to have his feelings. He's going through a process. That's great. I should not disrupt that process. That's his journey in this life. That's cool, right? It's different from me. That difference is not threatening. And I know it's not threatening because my psychological boundary is going to keep me protected. I'm going to let in what's true. I'm going to let in what's about me. I'm going to keep anything else out, right? So here he comes at me, and let's say he says, I don't know, I was really worried, and I can't believe you did this. You've done this 3 times last week. Okay, so I have my psychological boundary up. I can't remember doing it last week. That part doesn't feel true to me. Is it true I broke our agreement? Yes, I take that in. He's worried. Does that matter to me? Is it true? Yes, that's true. Is that worry about me? That worry is actually a process that's happening in him. But it's understandable why he's worried because I broke an agreement, right? So now, because I've taken in only what's true and I've kept out what's not about me and been so respectful of his process, knowing that that's really important, I can actually answer with compassion. You're right. I do this all the time. I'm so sorry, sweetie. Is there anything I can do right now to make it better? In addition to promising I am really going to work to get better at making our agreement stick for myself. I'll even set alarms in my phone. right? So me being able to show up in that way for him that's going to help us stay connected is really leaning heavy into me having a psychological boundary where I can treat myself with great worth and him with great worth at the same time. So I have an invitation for you as we wrap up session 1. What I'd love to do is for you to take a few moments after this session is done and think about a client. Could be the client we worked with earlier, could be a different one. Think about a specific client who might be helped by some of this information. And what I want you to do is think through how you would say it, how you would deliver that to your client. Just a little bit of a thought about this kind of psychological boundary, and write it down. And then, because embodied practice equals brain change, my invitation to you is that you actually practice before your client comes in, saying that whatever you wrote down out loud. You could even do it with a listening partner if you have a partnership with a therapist or a consultation group you're a part of. You could actually ask them, how does this land? Could I practice saying this out loud with you? This is the end of session 1. Next session, we'll be going into the neuroscience of psychological boundary and discover what that tells us about how to plan interventions that work.